Okay, so sorry folks for anybody tuning in live. We had some technical difficulties and stuff, so we are starting here now a little late, but this is the August 10th meeting. We have a few different topics to go over. We're going to talk about reviewing the use of Cloudflare for caching on Express.js.com and just some general things around that. We're going to talk about a discussion topic that's in the discussions repository, number 25. Should we keep the object prototype in rec.body and similar fields? Then we'll move on to discussion or issue number 27, which is Express, HTTP2, and Node.js core. From there, we'll move on to number 30, which is about moving in potentially multi-party module. And then we'll talk about tagging of 5.0 alpha release for Express. Then we'll talk about discuss working on examples and or moving examples out of core Express repo into separate repo, and then whatever else we get to. So yeah, we'll just jump right into the Cloudflare thing. So I know, to give anybody listening in a little bit of history here, is that a while ago we had an issue pop up where a user reported that they weren't able to access the Express.js.com website, which is which is pretty much the only documentation, really, ignoring trying to browse around the actual code repository. They couldn't access it through the Tor network, and it turned out that it was because Express.js.com is pointed to Cloudflare. And by default, Cloudflare does not denies Tor traffic. I think probably because of potential for abuse and things like that. I'm sure. Eventually, it was resolved by adding an exemption for that geolocation. So Cloudflare has a geolocation called, I think, proxy or anonymous or something, and we just allowed that because we don't care really. So it brought up the subject of, wait, just a kind of like a, hey, we're using Cloudflare on here, and just to find out, what do we use it for, and do we need it and stuff. Yeah, and to kind of gather up a little bit of stuff I think was followed up on is that Cloudflare, so we host our stuff on GitHub Pages, which is already basically like a CDN kind of a thing. GitHub will provide all that for us. Really the main thing at this point Cloudflare does is it actually just provides us free SSL to Express.js.com. And actually I wasn't even aware that we actually did SSL. I don't really notice just because we don't redirect. So, but I think that is probably the main things that if we remove it and just go to GitHub Pages, is that at this time they don't offer SSL for custom domains. I assume at some point they probably will with that whole that free SSL project. I just not off the top of my head right now, but I'm sure some of you are familiar with what that is. But we'll see. All right. So I'll let everybody talk about it, but from my point of view, at least from what I've gathered so far, is it seems like that probably will just leave it alone, is what it seems like to me, just because we are using the SSL in there, and removing Cloudflare would make us drop SSL, which isn't terrible. It's a documentation site, but it would break any links that are linking to https://expressjs.com, so that's the downside.
Yeah. So have you talked with Michael at all about the Foundation's Cloudflare account?
I have not. Mainly because, especially when they talked about the SSL, I decided, whatever. But yes, ideally at some point, now especially that, I know that it exists, because I didn't even know we actually were really even using Cloudflare before. But yeah, at some point, if we keep using it, then yeah, we'll just work with the Foundation or whatever to get controls if we even need that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So apparently, so Ryan Graham is the guy who sort of, as a leftover from the days, has the, is the admin, or he has the credentials for this Cloudflare, for the general account under which this, Cloudflare is administrated. And apparently he tried to get in contact with Michael a few times and never got a response, which, I'm sure it's just because he's really busy. But I think if we did want to transfer it over to the Node Foundation, we basically have to just delete it from the IBM account and then add it in, to the Node Foundation account, and so there'd be like a brief period there where it would be, off or something. So
we'd have to see if there's some kind of transition path there, so there would be no downtime, and make sure that you'd be able to move the certs over. Okay.
Yeah, I asked Ryan, and he said he thought the only way that he knew would be just to delete it from the IBM account and then add it into the Node Foundation account. So maybe there is a better way. I have no idea. It's not anything I know anything about at all. So.
All right. I'm supposed to talk to Michael here in the next couple of days, so I'll bring it up when I'm talking directly to him. So.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like in principle it would make sense for it to be, under the control of the Node Foundation.
If it helps, I mean, as Doug was saying, I mean, it might be good enough just to leave it alone unless another problem comes up later. So.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. So.
right, with the SSL thing, I'm almost inclined to say, unless we think that there's really going to be problems, we are aware that that's Cloudflare and that we're aware of who can help us. So I would say probably we might just leave it alone until, like, if GitHub ever offers, custom domain with SSL, then at that time perhaps then we'll just get rid of Cloudflare altogether and just directly on GitHub. But otherwise, I say it seems to me that we'll probably just leave it alone for now. We'll probably see what we can do. And whatever, but otherwise, like, since we know who we can reach out to if there's anything that comes up, which is just a straight proxy anyways, as far as I know, so it should be not really much maintenance.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Just leaving it as is. I don't have any concerns. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Cool. And as far as the certificate goes, James, if that's actually supplied by Cloudflare directly, or someone from IBM had bought it? Because I'm just not that familiar with Cloudflare.
Yeah, that would be a question for Ryan. That predates the IBM thing, I think. Unless they bought new certificates after the acquisition.
Cool. Actually, I just looked it up, and actually I'm inclined to think it's actually supplied automatically by Cloudflare, because I just looked at the certificate. So yeah, it's issued to SNI and some number.cloudflareSSL.com, and the valid range is really tiny. So it looks like it's just something that they provide for free, or someone's paying for it. But at least it doesn't look like we have to poke someone at IBM to renew the certificate, is what it looks like, at least.
Yeah, that makes it a heck of a lot easier.
Yep. Cool. All right. I think that's probably what we'll just do then, is just leave it alone, and if anything comes up, we know how to reach to. Michael might say some other stuff. We may or may not internally move it to some other account, but unless it's just someone just wants to do it, like, we'll probably just leave it alone then, and reevaluate if GitHub ever offers free SSL for custom domains.
Yeah. Well, if it ever becomes, if something needs to get done and Ryan's too busy to respond or whatever, it gets to a point where it just needs somebody else that can administer it. Just let me know, and I'll work with Ryan on getting whatever transferred. Okay.
Cool. All right. Anybody else have any other comments about this before we move to the next one? No. Okay. So I'm actually thinking of if we should actually rearrange this for James, maybe just we'll rearrange 25 and 27, and I think we'll just go into 27 next, which is Express, HTTP/2, and Node.js core.
Right. I'm currently looking at what it's going to take to get HTTP2 into core, including whether we should do it at all. That's still a fairly significant open question. But because of the way the current HTTP request and response objects are implemented, they're pretty tightly bound to our HTTP1 implementation. I know Express does quite a bit of kind of reaching into that. There could be some breakage, so I kind of need to figure out, from Express's point of view, what would be the best way to go about this, and whether it's even a good idea. And I know that's a big question. It's not one that we could just come up with a succinct answer to right now, but I'd love your thoughts on kind of direction.
Yeah, it is a hard thing. I mean, I've looked at it a lot too, and I know me and Blake have had some discussions a while back about similar kind of stuff for backends, because, yeah, so obviously, Express existed before we were really over it anyways, so, things are the way they are right now. But the way it is right now is that pretty much, Express was originally there was originally just a routing, so it would just take literally whatever rec and res you gave it, which would usually always be the built-in core ones, and route them. Of course, since then, Express has expanded. It adds it of course directly just adds methods on the rec and res, which, of course is kind of tiptoey, because core can add methods that could conflict with our things, of course, but ignoring that whole issue. In addition to that, just for various things where there either isn't an API still, or there wasn't an API for old versions of Node and now is for new versions of Node, there are some things where it's essentially basically hacks where we basically do stare down into the actual. We try never to read from private things in there, but we usually, it's written around the understanding of what the actual implementation is doing, even if it's using public methods, but still with the understanding of exactly what Node.js Core's implementation looks like, which makes it really tricky to, of course, alter stuff. So the question, of course, is how much can, if we were to even just make HTTP2 be the same, how compatible would that even end up being with the way Express is currently done? Right. Which is, of course, a hard question to answer right away. I mean, I'd be inclined to say that even if we made an API compatible HTTP2 implementation, ideally we would not just hack it into HTTP1, it would just be a new HTTP2 implementation. I know that James, I think you referred somewhere to using that really good C library for it. I know that curl uses that library too.
Yep.
So obviously if we base it off of that, I'm sure there's going to be, even if we make an API look the same, it's still going to be, somewhat different, of course.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that you have some HTTP2 specific semantics. So really, unless we try to hack it in, I mean, at this point, I would say any implementation from our point of view would just be a different one. So it kind of brings us a little bit around to what I know that myself and Blake had discussed a little bit, which was which was basically the idea of, rather than passing rec and res that anybody passes in and just attaching crap onto that, to essentially pass around an Express specific rec and an Express specific res, and essentially do a decorator around the lower level rec and res objects, so that way we can normalize the API, and thus Express, from a user's point of view, would never actually directly access anything in the Node Core API, and that from our point of view we could easily, just say, oh yeah, HTTP2 will, make sure that all rec and res have semantics for it, but otherwise it should be, it'll just be not supported until we actually make it work, kind of thing. Where right now it's kind of like in a weird iffy land. But yeah, so I mean, basically, and then the other question I think is, does Express care if it's in Node.js core or a separate module? I don't think we care. I mean, we'd be happy to, support it regardless of where it lives, whether it's in Express core or Express or like another module that people have to install. So I think from that point of view, I think we don't actually care if it's in core or not. And that I would say the easiest, the safest assumption is we would have to make with that is that whatever the HTTP2 library is probably just not going to work by default with anything Express does currently, and that we would definitely have to make some changes. Obviously, what those changes would be, we have to figure out. But I don't think that there's a good way to make it work out of the box.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think you're right. I mean, I've been going through and looking at it. The prototype that I currently do have is based on the ng HTTP2 library. It's a fantastic C implementation. It's probably the most well-tested implementation out there outside of the browser. So it's really solid. But the actual internal details are quite a bit different from the current implementation. And the way that I have it, it's basically a completely new request and response class. There's it's like HTTP2 request and response, and the internals are completely different. I've implemented probably 90% of the API, just like the methods and the properties, to be fairly close. But quite a few of the details are different, and there's some things like HTTP2 doesn't have a status message, right? So there's things like that are just going to be are just like completely different. So I think probably the best bet is the way I'm looking at it is that it would be introduced as an experimental feature, maybe by around the Node version 8 timeframe. And that we're just going to have to just work incrementally with Express and Happy and some of the other libraries just to make sure that they're able to use it and the API makes sense before we do anything official. So it's going to be a pretty long road.
Right. Yeah, and that's why, especially a lot of these libraries, for example, two main other frameworks that come to mind to me are Happy.js and Koa. Both of those, so Happy.js hides the rec and res a lot more than we do, and even Koa does, but they still do expose it. So they have I think it's .raw, .rec, and .raw, .res. So libraries can still do that. So of course, even if you couldn't just easily just slap it in, one, you'd have to know all your plugins, and if they're inspecting those or not, and Koa is kind of almost like the in-between of what Express does and what Happy does. So they have that context object, and but really they're only accessors. They just basically moved all of our sugar off of that Express would have off of rec and res directly, and just put them not only in context, but they also have their own rec and res objects. But they can also still see inside the raw ones. So that's why, So myself and Blake were brainstorming a little while ago. It's unfortunate, part of history, right? The Node.js becoming big is that everybody just kind of formed everything around this the request and response that's built into Node.js, and this kind of of course it was easy. They're all it's the only one. But now even HTTP2 and core is basically starting to say, yes, there's just like Userland has other ones, there are just going to be more than one. So we just got to figure out, a good way to just support that.
Yeah.
And some frameworks will have a little bit easier time, like I said, like Happy, which completely abstracts it away, though they do expose it a little bit, but they can just write that off as just a major version bump, or just write that off as, got your own. Koa is a little bit harder for them. It's kind of similar-ish boat to us. And then, of course, at this point, like without us changing a lot of stuff, we're in probably, at least out of the three, in the worst position because we build everything around those directly. So we'll just have to work to change that, which is certainly doable. Especially because you said around Node V8 timeline anyways.
Yeah.
And V7, I don't even think has had a 7.00 yet. I think it's still in Nightly's, is that right?
Yeah. The 7.00 is expected to come out mid to late October. So.
Yep. So we certainly have a lot of lead time for sure. So, and I don't I don't have any qualms of whatever we need to do to get it done. Obviously, we'll try our hardest to try to from our point of view, because one thing we could easily do for and James and you guys won't be concerned with it either. I mean, maybe we end up doing this abstraction layer and we just make the layer work like Node.js Core's old one did, and then just basically do that. So
that's actually another one of the possibilities is that with the way that the HTTP protocol works, there really is two layers. I mean, there's the binary framing layer and basically the session management there, and then the HTTP semantics really layer on top. One thing we could do in Core is just stop at the framing layer, right? And just say, okay, here's how you create an HTTP2 session with regards to doing frames, and leave it to you guys to do the actual HTTP semantics, right? That's
right. Yeah, because I mean, the framing is definitely something I don't particularly want to have to write over and over again, because I mean, there isn't that much you can really framing itself and the way that works with the multiplexing and everything is not it's the same. I mean, it's part of the protocol. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a tricky question. In fact, we've been kind of talking about that a little bit over in MySQL as well, just some back-end stuff for parsing packets on that and some changes that Oracle's making, but kind of similar almost, I think.
It's always fun when people start changing stuff underneath. Okay, so I will get I'm going to keep iterating on the proposal. Like I said, right now I'm primarily focusing on, okay, I have working code, but is this something we really want to do? So I'm still kind of getting input on that. Does it really belong in Core, or just having just really top-notch module out there that does this.
Right.
So I'm maybe I'm probably about maybe a month away from opening the Node enhancement proposal on this to kind of start proposing a specific direction on this. Once I get a draft of that, I'd love to float it by the Express.js and just get your input on that direction when I'm a little closer. So, give me a few weeks.
Cool. Yeah, just let us know. I mean, that discussion issue at least. I mean, we're not going to close it anytime soon. While it's still open, so I mean, you can always drop by there or whatever works best.
Okay. Okay. Well, cool. I appreciate it. I don't think there's anything else for me on the agenda, so I'm going to go ahead and drop off, and I'll talk to y'all later.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
Cool. See you, James.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
All right, so I know we had a couple other things. We have a bunch of stuff on here. I'm sorry I'm changing the the thing. I know that James was probably going to drop off, so I just wanted to get his two things that he was going to be here for up front. And I'm changing it up a little bit again because I just want to at least make sure that we get number 30, which is move in multi-party. Just touched on real quick. I mean, there isn't too much. So what happened was a couple days ago, I think it's Tuesday actually, so I guess yesterday, not a couple days ago, Andrew emailed me and asked if I wanted to just move multi-party somewhere else. So, I'd hate having crap under my own account in GitHub anyways. And I know I use it. I mean, there's also, Busboy, which I know is another good big one. Formidable, which is actually what multi-party was forked from, is another one. And I think Happy.js they made, or Aaron Hammer had made Pez, which is yet another one. But I just felt like, he asked me, and I haven't responded yet to him, but I figured, like, if it were me, and before this existed, I would have said, yep, and I would have just moved it into Pillar.js. But, one, I don't want to do that, because I wouldn't want random modules appearing. So I figured definitely moving in a module definitely warrants TC discussion. So my thought is that it seems fine to me. I would probably have the 3 orgs. It makes sense more for either Pillar.js or JS-HTTP, one of those two. My initial thought was at least Pillar for now. We can move things at any time, of course. But it really depends on you guys. So it's been like that module itself, just for the curious here, is it's basically been in autopilot mode. I mean, it's not really actively being developed, but it's also not actively having problems. So it just kind of like exists. I guess cons would be, of course, moving more stuff into our org, right? More stuff that we have to oversee and release and whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's a con in my mind. A pro in my mind is that does bring into us, without needing to build it, a parser for that multi-part type. We don't necessarily have any parsers for any other types anyways, but I mean, Node.js Core supplies us with a parser for query string, and then JSON parsing is done by JavaScript itself. So it would move that in there, which seems which in multi-part is one of the original things that HTML forms could submit, multi-part and URL encoded. So it does fit really into here, and is being offered up. So I don't know. I mean, those are the pros and cons I could think of. I lean towards just doing it, but I want to hear from what you guys' thoughts are on if we should do it or not do it, and thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, we have the Multer repository on the
Yep.
Express.js org now, and I guess that's kind of more high level, I think, than multi-party. I don't see a problem with bringing it in personally. I think it should be good.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, real quick, before anyone else responds here, just to Linus's thing, because that's a good point, of course, and I didn't forget about that one, but I didn't really mention it either, I guess. But so here's the rub with that, of course, is that it is not a middleware, right? So it wouldn't go in the Express.js org, which is pretty much just like main Express, and really this is the middleware, like the really high level goodies. But it does create this oddness with the middleware we do have. So we don't have a middleware that uses multi-party, though Express 3 and lower did use multi-party. But yet we have a multi-part middleware that uses Busboy. So it is kind of weird. So we could either just do nothing, right? Have that middleware there, or Mutler or whatever, and just it continues to use Busboy. We put multi-party in there. I know that I've been also maintaining a little module for Andrew for a long time. It was just called Connect-multiparty or something. Once again, it's one of those stupid ones that start with Connect, like that Connect timeout we have, but still, like, we could also just move that in too, and thus have 2 middleware, right? A Busboy-based one and a multi-party-based one. But then at the same time, it's like, general users really don't care if it's what the implementation is. They just want multi-part. So it could create confusion that way too. I mean, we don't have to decide that kind of stuff at this point, but those are just the stuff that ran through my mind in case you guys were thinking of stuff. But I don't know. I still think it is fine, because like I said, at the same time, maybe at some point we might end up making a whole bunch of changes to multi-party, make it fit like what we want, and then just move to that. I mean, who knows? So.
Yeah, my first instinct was thinking about just moving Multer over to multi-party, but then, I mean, the first paragraph, I think, says that the Busboy is faster, maybe you should check out that. So I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah, and of course, like I said, because it would be really different if like we had Muleter and then Brian said, "Do you want Busboy?" It's like, well, I mean that makes perfect sense. Or the other way around, if Muleter uses multi-party and then Andrew said, "Do you want multi-party?" I mean, makes sense to me. There'd be no real like good reason why not to, because I mean it would just bring in just that dependency just into us as well. But at the same time, we could end up just morphing both of them to be just different. I mean, I don't know. So I mean, it's at least something, I guess. It doesn't. I mean, we could break it down even as far as saying the name, right? Do we want the name multi-party? If we just wanted some multi-part parser, it's like, do we want that name, or do we just say don't care? So, like I said, it kind of all the Express before 4, because they all used it, Express 3 and all below do have a dependency on multi-party. So, I mean, though we got rid of that, and of course, Express 4 going forward, we don't have any plans on taking a dependency on there. Though there has always been plans to maybe do like multi-part parsing in the body parsing module, but all the ones that are out there were I felt like really too heavy and stuff. So I mean, at the same time, I could think that multi-party we could, now that it's like definitely completely under whatever we wanted to do, we could probably morph that into something more simplified that we might want to make as a dependency of make body parser use that module. I mean, that's always potential. I don't know, but that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, I see. A good thing about moving it in would be if we ever need, then we could morph it into fit more of our needs. I think it could be good.
Yeah, I mean, we can always kick it out if we want to, so.
Yeah.
It's not permanent. Okay.
I just have sorry, Doug. I just have a question. So you were mentioning that it would probably be pulled into either Pillar.js or JS HTTP. I was just trying to understand what the difference between those two orgs is meant to be like. What is there a difference?
Yeah. So JS HTTP is usually like the low-level things like header parsing, like all the modules that do like header parsing and serialization, stuff that no one really, like normal users aren't going to do, is in there. Pillar.js was as Jeremiah had put it, the build your own framework blocks, kind of like the Express would just be one of those pieces, and then Express.js was Express and its middleware. So, I mean, I only really multi-party is probably like a JS HTTP because it's just doing it just like the parsing and all that stuff. It seems a little heavier, which is why I kind of thought Pillar, but like I said, we can always move it around. It's not really, there's no real hard lines. It's kind of like, as someone literally said in a meeting today, it's the spirit of it. So, no real definition. There you go. Figure it out.
Okay. So, I'm just trying to sort this out because I've been trying to add a little bit of docs for all these modules, in that that one issue, I started realizing that all these, I call them utility.
Yeah.
Utility functions. I don't know if that's quite the right term, but
I mean, that sounds good enough to me. I mean, that's pretty simplistically. That's like the simplistically way you could do it. I mean, utility sounds like a way to put it for sure. Is what JS HTTP I would call just utility stuff.
Yeah, and then now, so you said JS HTTP is stuff that most users wouldn't need to use, but that the Express framework makes use of. But is Pillar.js, do you in general, as a just sort of a broad generalization, do you think they're the sorts of utility modules that might be more useful to people writing apps with Express?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So like the Pillar.js would be the more useful ones. Like for example, the router is in there. The send module is in there. Yeah, that would be, I think, like I would classify the Express as like JS is just like it's middleware plus the main express, which is basically like the I want to just slap some stuff together, done kind of like users, and then the hey, I'm a little bit more of a power user. I'm gonna make these routers and compose this stuff together and whatever and how I feel would be like. Then they'd start going to like pillar kind of a thing. JSHTP is like the people who are really doing something that is just completely not even in line with the framework, like they want to like parse some random header for something, because essentially we need that code to be somewhere, so we just dump it in there kind of thing. And of course anybody can use that if they want to, but I feel like in general it's kind of like we needed this to exist, so we made it, and we just put it here because a lot of the times like we'll have like a few middleware that all need to parse the same type of header, so instead of copying and pasting that code like in each middleware, we just put it in a module. So
yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, no, it makes a lot more sense to me now, because I was trying to sort that out in my head. Thanks.
Yep, and that's why I kind of like thought multi-party kind of like fits, I feel, a little bit more in pillar than JSHTP, just because at least the current state of everything is like people usually do use that directly, and it's not like a super low-level one at this point. So it does feel like more like send. Like I feel like it's really similar to the send module, in like how people would use it, like at the level people would be at when they would go to grab that module.
Yeah.
So Blake, any comments? I know you haven't said much. Nope, he shook his head no.
No, I agree with it. We should definitely take it over it. If anything, like you said, it can move later. But the biggest thing I've found is a lot of people, when they can't maintain something, they tend to go offline, and then we would have no control over that when people depend on this thing. So at least if it's under an organization that some of us have access to, we can then promote a new maintainer. We can create an issue, and someone else could take that over in the future. It sounds like maybe that was what the author intended. I don't know the context of why they reached out to you, but it sounds like maybe they don't have enough time to work on it anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is, because I'm sure he's doing other stuff, so yeah. But yeah, so what we'll do is here listening, or you guys or anybody listening, go to the issue number 30, so Express.js/discussions, issue number 30. Just go up and use the, I guess we'll just probably use the GitHub reactions. I saw Jonathan had thumbed up it. I just thumbed up it. Thumb it up, thumb it down, whatever your vote is, and we'll go. I'll circle around back at maybe like Friday or Monday or something and see what's there. Cool. Now we'll go back to what was number 2 on the list, number 25, which is should we keep the object prototype in rec.body and similar fields, opened by our friend Linus.
Yes.
If you want to bring everybody up to speed.
So basically, I have gotten a few issues open a number of times in Multer asking me to change the rec.body field into a normal object, because currently it's a prototype-less object. That means that you, for example, can't do .hasOwnProperty or similar fields because it doesn't inherit the normal object prototype. The upside is that you don't get any strange issues when someone posts a field named hasOwnProperty inside to your body parsing middleware. So, I mean, it's a hard line because on one hand, it probably, I mean, it has broken a few modules that does body validation. I know I submitted a pull request to one of them that I think never landed. On the other hand, I mean, it might be considered a good practice to not use the functions that are on the object prototype just because of issues like this.
Cool. I guess I'll comment first. So it is a very contentious issue. It's been around for a long time. So there's 2 camps, right? And I feel like it's very much like this style kind of stuff. I feel like both have valid arguments, both have valid pros and cons, and there's no real winner over the other. I mean, I would say that my point of view is that I do like the idea of making it so developers can't accidentally implement the wrong pattern, right? I always feel like if we make it so they can't do the wrong pattern right away, then that's always better. So, for example, if we have a null prototype, right, if they could have never done has own prototype, then in general it's usually, I feel like, somewhat more developer friendly, because then they won't get into the situation where they think everything's just fine until someone maliciously submits a form that purposely says has a field called has own prototype, makes their thing crash, and that potentially they were doing it, inside of where the call stack didn't have a try, so then it does like a uncaught exception, So usually that's like my main, what I always think is the pro of doing that. Of course, then there's the other side, which is the con. So con is that it's weird to see an object like that, generally in JavaScript, because everything always inherits from object.prototype. So it's a little odd, and then that you have that in combination with the fact that still, because of speed reasons especially, parsing all JSON pretty much always uses JSON.parse, which of course it will instantiate all objects with the prototype. So then you end up in a situation where it's inconsistent, which is what you experienced there, because some, as you said, some module or something assumed that rec.body had it, which it would. But yeah, and then also at the same time, and I just want to make sure that, for anybody listening and for you guys too, Node.js core itself did recently move to use null prototypes on a few different things in core. So for example, the query string module in Node.js core, starting in, I think, version 5, or whatever, version 6, one of those two, I think it was 6 actually, now does a null prototype on the query strings parse results. So that, of course, kind of spills into like the body parser module, for example. So if you use the query string, you'll get an object with no prototype, but if you use JSON, you'll get an object with a prototype. And of course, if you use a role and you get a buffer, a buffer object has a prototype. Even a string has a prototype. So that's why it's kind of weird to see one without a prototype, but at the same time, I feel like it's, nicer. So, that's really it. I would say in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to care, and that we would just have the object prototype really just so it's consistent. People are just familiar with it and it seems right. But at the same time, it's kind of weird. For some things, so for a little bit also context, so we have there's a cookie parser module. It's a pretty common module. That actually also is a null prototype that when it parses the cookies into an object. Of course, that's a little different issue because really all it needed was it really did need a dictionary. And with ES6 and eventually when that's supported more commonly, and that when we drop the versions of Node that don't have it, that would probably definitely just move to a stupid map object. So that's an easy solution, but these rec.bodies are the harder ones because, a lot of people, if we couldn't just exchange that for a map, that would, I think, be even more confusing. So, yeah, I know I didn't really give an answer. I was just kind of talking about all my different thoughts and stuff, but if I were to sum up an answer, I would say, in an ideal world, I would say that a null prototype is best for the developer, even if they don't know what they want. It's just like developing any product, right? The users don't know what they want until we tell them. We told them they want an Apple iWatch, so That's what they want. Done. They didn't know they wanted it until we told them. So I feel like it's kind of like this here too, but at the same time, it can be surprising when people develop it against something that operates differently. So then it almost starts becoming more of a negative than it would be a positive otherwise. I know that Node.js Core has been contemplating changing the rec.headers object into a plain object, but they have not been able to make that move just yet because there are so many things that aren't compatible with it currently. But I haven't seen them say they aren't going to do it. So, but even then, I feel like that's more of a dictionary than a parse of a body, because I feel like the body is like less of a dictionary. Because, for example, when I write C# code, right, we don't talk about the body in JSON or whatever being a dictionary. No, we talk about, deserializing it into an object, like literally like inflating an object. So, like, just by its feel, a body feels like an object and not a dictionary, I think. So, like, in that regard, it kind of like feels like it should have an object.prototype. So, I don't know. Ultimately, we'll talk here, but I feel like ultimately I would leave that up to your discretion as the maintainer of Multer of whether you want to change it or not. I can tell you that, like, the only thing that I directly made a nullable object that people interact with is the cookie parser, but that will just change to a map at some point, so I don't even think it's the same kind of an issue. And as far as body parser is concerned, in my point of view, is that I'm just going to use whatever the other modules use. So, like, I'm going to continue. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to continue using JSON.parse until maybe there's at least something that's comparable speed-wise, because right now it's just so much faster, which will continue to have an object.prototype. We're going to continue to use QS module for the extended parsing, which because of compatibility reasons, it has a choice between whether you use one in null prototype and not. I believe I have it set to use the object.prototype, so it doesn't have a null prototype either. And in fact, the only one that does is the core query string, and only if you're using a certain version, which is actually a little annoying to me because it's like changes with the version, so it's a little irritating. But it's what we have, so. Yeah, anybody else have any other thoughts, or Linus, any reflection thoughts?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't feel strongly in either direction. I think I lean a bit against having a null prototype just because of it usually triggers an error right away instead of just triggering it when someone is trying to be malicious.
Right.
But yeah. I don't really know what is the best way to go here. Yeah,
I feel like you're experiencing stuff that I've experienced a lot, especially since I started doing heavy stuff, where you get like an issue here where someone's complaining about something, and then you get another issue and another issue, and then of course you start questioning, well, what if I should change it to these, to satisfy these people? It's a really hard choice because one, anybody who doesn't care is not making issues on your repo, so they're not thanking you that it's a null prototype. And of course, it's very possible that as soon as you change it, then people start opening issues that the fact that it's not a null prototype.
Yeah,
so it's a very hard thing to do if it's based off user decisions. So a lot of times, I feel like when I've done it before, I kind of like have the inclination of, should I just make the change to shut these people up, basically, is kind of like what it feels like, or should I, stand my ground? And really at the top, it really depends, like, obviously it's easy if I have a strong opinion about it or not, or I really understand that it's really beneficial one way or another, and this one's kind of like the hardest one because it's not really great. I have, though, for comparison, for that cookie parser module, anybody who opens that issue, I will close and say, no, that's too bad. Because the reason is, like I said, it's not the same field, and it really is a map, and I will change it to a map object at some point. So that one is really easy. But these body ones, I really don't know. Like I said, obviously you can say like, well, people are using those things and it's going to change on them. They're shooting themselves in the foot, which is true. There's actually, you could of course always take like that weird ground. I feel like it's a weird ground. So if you guys are familiar with the QS module, so they had an option for these prototype situation where they basically would, any key, they would, before adding it to an object, they would say, hey, does this key exist on object.prototype? If so, then ignore the key, essentially drop the key. Therefore, you could call a .hasOwn property, and it would always work, even if someone said hasOwn property in the field name, because it would just get ignored. So pro is it has the object prototype, and it will always work correctly. Con is that you lose information, which isn't really a con unless you're trying to do, like, say, a reverse proxy, and you don't want things to drop just because it happened to go through JavaScript language at some layer, which is super annoying. But at the same time, like, you could call that a fringe case, and tell proxy people they just need to use like a different way to do it. So at least QS lets you choose that behavior, which can satisfy those kind of people. So I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. If you do switch to having a prototype, I guess you have to make the decision as well. Then do you allow fields that are present in the prototype?
Right. So that's always like another thing, if you want to think about it. But yeah, like I said, my biggest thoughts are that it's nice. I feel like from just a developer's perspective, I feel like it's nice to make them not do it. I mean, because sometimes it's easy to forget that the people who use these software are from all walks of skill. So it's not just, the skilled people using it, right? You have a lot of, new people to JavaScript, new people to just programming, new people to Node.js, haven't, had a lot of experience yet, and they're just, and, a lot of issues, because I don't watch that repo, so forgive me, I just don't know what the issues are. I'm not a watcher on that repo, just because I know that you got it just fine, so I feel like I'm not going to get bothered with all those emails.
Probably wise.
Some, of course, just in case you've seen these issues, because I've seen them all the time, sometimes people just make an issue and they're just angry. They just want to, basically they ended up making a wrong assumption. Sometimes it's even as simple as literally it was documented. Sometimes it wasn't documented, but sometimes it was. But at that point, as soon as they make that issue, usually they don't care. They just want to take out their anger, essentially, on something like that. They wasted, 5 days debugging or some crap. Those are the hardest, of course, issues. And you're never going to satisfy those people one way or another. You're usually going to get them no matter what. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to open pull requests because I know I did it for some body validating middleware, and I think I think I'm leaning towards just keeping it as it is, if no one has any other opinion.
Cool. Blake or Rand, if you have it.
I would leave it as it is. I would err on the side of developer experience. People are going to get upset once, but then they're going to thank you later when they don't run into a bug. Like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot of people that are new to learning programming. A lot of people will learn this stuff manually. It's better that they're not learning it in production or learning in development.
Or in even like a QA environment or some staging environment at least. Hopefully somewhere prior to production. Obviously, if you're a little tiny shop and you are your own production, then I guess it's a little different. But
yeah, maybe there's a document we can make though that's easier to link to, so that when you close it, you don't have to keep repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's something that you think we need to mention specifically in the documentation, maybe that'll help people as part of the learning experience. Just open a little doc issue for me, and I'll add it to the docs, or
Cool.
If it's something you get asked repeatedly, that's certainly a candidate for documentation, as far as I'm.
Yeah. I mean, it hasn't been opened that much, and I think I could probably clarify it maybe in the Molter documentation as well. And I guess if anyone opens, I can always link to the discussions, the issue 25 in the discussions repo.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good to me. All right. So I know. So I don't. Before I move on to any other topic, ignore even including the technical difficulties. That before we started the broadcast, we're actually approaching 1 hour now. So just to kind of like throw everybody for indefinite times, every 2 weeks. So we're the only ones who need to have time. So. Yeah. Listeners can always drop off and watch the video wherever they stopped.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to leave at the hour, but you guys have to stop, obviously.
Cool. Well, so I guess before anybody else have to leave soonish or anything, because we don't have to hit all the topics, but we only have 2 more.
Yeah, I'm available for as long as you want me.
Cool. All right. Well, it sounds like what we'll do is we'll move on to, I feel like, of the 2, the more pressing one, which is discuss working on examples and or moving examples out of core Express repo into separate repo per some issue number 2923 on Express. Give a little bit of history is that there's been a couple comments by just other people, and even just general thoughts on like, hey, so Express.js's main repo has an examples directory, and it has a bunch of examples. They were made, actually, most of them were made by TJ, or some were contributed by other people. I mean, what the examples are, how useful they are, we're not talking about that or anything like that, but just the thought is like, hey, should examples as a general thing be its own repository somewhere? So someone could just say, I want to see examples, or Express.js.com wants to link to examples. They could just link to a repo of just examples. And so the thought was, what if we, moved out of the main repo and into its own repo? So like I said, some pros I think that were discussed were, one, the repo is only those examples, so even though it's in its own directory, it can sometimes be a little bit easier to nav around them and things when you don't have other unrelated non-example stuff hanging around. 2 is that examples can be updated, separately from the main Express repo, especially that comes down to like breaking changes because the examples, use Express. And of course, they can only use the one version of Express. It's not, you don't really have examples of like, here's an Express 4 example, here's an Express 3 example, or anything like that. It's always just the current Express. So theoretically, a separate repo could, theoretically have one example for the different on each different version, which may become more important if we, whatever we decide to do about HTTP2, that might become more important in the future. I don't know. Some downsides are that, at least currently, which I am working on getting rid of, but at least currently, unfortunately, a lot of our tests are tied up in those stupid examples. So when Express repo runs the examples, it actually, like, a bunch of those examples, not all the examples, also have tests, and it runs through those. And if you actually disabled it to not do any of those, run any tests in the test acceptance directory, the code coverage drops below 100%. So there's actually some testing things that are not tested anywhere else, which is, of course, very stupid. I don't like it. That shouldn't be the way it is, obviously, but it is how it is right now. A bunch of those are in router, and the router module has a bunch of tests, but one of the reasons it doesn't have 100% coverage on that module is actually because some of those tests were in these stupid examples, and no one's kind of gotten around to making the test yet, so we'll do that eventually. But so that's really the main thing, is that to move it out, we do kind of probably at least need to get some of those tests into core. It's not, something that does need to be done regardless, anyways, so it's not like it's a big con, just a, hey, here's this kind of like a blocker, really, because ideally we do have the coverage badge, right? And so it's nice to have it say 100% and not be lower. I mean, in the end, does it matter? No, it does. I mean, it kind of matters a little bit, not just because of the badge, but also because, Express being so popular, people make PRs against it. And it's really nice if we can at least at a glance understand if it's a breaking change or not. Like either it broke tests or we see the person literally altering tests in their PR. So we can at least really easily identify if it's breaking or not, just, without staring at it, really hard. So those are my thoughts on it. That's kind of like a little bit of history. So, yeah. Otherwise, I guess what I would say in general is I'm not opposed to moving them out. I personally don't care whether they're in or out. Really, all I care is that we have tests that still run in the main repo, and at that point, I would just say we just need to kick ourselves or something and actually make stupid tests. So, yeah. And I guess one other comment, pro about the examples being their own repo is that theoretically we could put a lot more information in there and make potentially make the examples a lot more useful, especially documentation wise.
Yeah, I've been wanting to add documentation, or at least link into the examples from the docs. That's been a big missing piece for a long time. It's not something I've had time to do, but I think it would be a great idea to at least link into it, regardless of whether they're in a separate repo or not. But
right.
It probably makes sense. I mean, I can see arguments in both ways, but as long as you have the test coverage, in my opinion, it would probably be better to have them be separate.
I agree.
One of the big advantages of moving it, of course, is that you could add a collaborator if you're more comfortable adding them to collaborate on examples and not the entire Express repo.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's exactly the same as with any kind of repo division and organization division, is that it's really good at separating things, because GitHub is that's like really the only controls they have. So obviously, if GitHub could say like some person can be a collaborator and they can edit all they want, this folder and not other things, and they can just act like an PR to all the rest, then that's different, but it doesn't do that. So that is another pro of having that, is just more possibility of really delegation, basically.
Yeah.
And actually what just came across my mind is that might be especially for people who are, it may actually be good as a stepping stone for potential collaborators too, right? Like theoretically, we say, hey, they're looking for stuff, or they seem pretty good. I mean, especially if people who express interest in examples, which is a lot easier because, they're just examples. Like, it could very well be a stepping stone to just say, like, hey, you can just, here's kind of like the general guidelines, but we don't really have to worry about it too much, so, yeah, it could be a useful tool as that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because I know that a lot of people, every so often there's people who say, how can I get started, collaborating on Express? How can I, get things like that? Of course, if the answer is, comment and reply to issues, it's kind of boring, I guess. It's not really code. But it could be, hey, you could just shore up the examples, do some example stuff. It's not super hard. You're a user of Express, and anybody can make examples, and we can always use examples of things. People these days, I feel like especially a lot of people love copy pasting. Having a lot of examples can also help us with getting rid of erasing bad patterns from the internet, because a lot of people, examples when you search online, you'll see in people's blog posts or in Stack Overflow answers, and even if they're short, even if they're poor quality, at least they get some answer at the time, right? But there's no opportunity for us to change them in the future and maybe give a better example out of things like that really easily. So, it's almost kind of like if it was a really easy, low barrier entry to just add stuff to that, maybe that will help with that kind of situation as well.
Yeah. So how much work do you think it would be to say if we did move the examples into their own row to beef up the test coverage?
It's probably not too difficult. I mean, pretty much I would, I don't remember exactly, but the way I would attack it basically would be I would just edit the package.json, make it not run the acceptance for the coverage, run coverage real quick, just see the general areas that aren't covered in that, and then I wouldn't even refer to the old tests. I would just literally just build them back up myself. And it's not that much. I think it dropped it less than 10%. So, and some of the things I think are probably just easy things that were just completely just not done. And especially with the Express, especially if we say we'll move out examples really at any time, we don't give a crap what version of Express it is, but if it is with Express 5 even, that should actually, Express 5 should almost make that a non-issue, because especially with the router being moved out, which is the majority of the code anyways, I think that at that point there probably isn't really untested stuff with them anyways at that point. So, and for the coverage, we're mainly concerned with whatever's on the master branch, because that's what people love making PRs against, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like the general consensus is to go ahead and move it out. But obviously, I think there needs to be a concerted effort to make sure the test coverage stays.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily what we were planning really discussing right now. I think we're just trying to get consensus. It sounds to me like consensus is let's go ahead and move it out to its own repo. So what we'll do is we'll just put it there. Yes, we're going to work to move it out of its own repo, and then here are the concerns, and then either we can work to it, or at least I'll write it down on there, and then anybody could work to it. I'm probably also just going to give I'll probably just write down those tips of kind of what I would do, and I'll try it out on a computer as well, just so I can make sure that seems to give accurate results that will help anybody who just wants to drive by, commit, or just looking for stuff to help with. Obviously, an external contributor is not going to be able to make a new repo, right, and move it. I don't expect someone to drive by that, but anybody could drive by with those tests that we need, so or we could do it or someone, so cool. But that was, I think, the main goal here was I think we said, yes, we think that's a good idea to move it out to its own repo, so we'll do whatever it takes to do that kind of thing. Sounds good to me.
Cool.
Okay. I know that, Rand, if you drop off, that is okay.
Yeah.
I know you said at the top of the hour.
I took some notes. I'll post them into the issue later, and it is what it is. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Take care. See ya.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Real quick, we'll just touch on the last one that's listed specifically, which is the tagging of a new Express 5 alpha. So the last Express 5 alpha was released prior to 4.14 of Express, and thus does not incorporate any changes or fixes in there. It's an alpha. I don't really care much about it. I mean, it's certainly not for any production code, just to kind of drive by, test it out, whatever, provide feedback kind of a thing, I feel like. So, yes, in fact, I did merge it up with the intention of doing it. I really wanted to merge a bunch of those PRs into it that are marked 5, and I just never got around to it, and then a bunch of lame stuff like not a little bit ago and stuff. Got my laptop is not here, which had a bunch of all my stuff on it, so sucks, but whatever. I don't know. I'm not. Well, I feel like we'll get it done, but I feel like there's a lot more stuff that's more pressing personally than that. So, I mean, we could even just say like, hey, let's just take whatever's on that branch and just tag it and release it real quick, and not even bother with waiting for any other real changes to get merged, and then the change log for it can basically just be like, oh, it just adds all this stuff from 4.14, and then that's the only change. But like I said, the reason why I haven't really is because I feel like the point of the 5 alphas being alphas is to provide feedback on the actual changes. And so without any real 5.0 changes, sure, it doesn't include any fixes from 4.14, but I mean, without those, Express works fine. So I feel like it's almost like not really worth even bothering with a release, because it's not like we're giving anything new for people to give feedback on, is how I kind of felt about it. So that's why I never really bothered. If it was betas, maybe that'd be a different story, because I mean, betas are kind of like okay, maybe you can start using it. Of course, a release candidate, very different story. And then of course, a real version we would have coordinated releasing a new version of 5 right after 4.14 came out, anyways. So that's my thoughts on it. So I don't know if you guys have additional thoughts on it.
I think it sounds reasonable, the things you said. Not really anything to add.
Yeah, because I mean, the more we release, of course, the more versions get out there and, stuff. So I don't know, whatever. Cool. Well, I guess we'll just leave it kind of like where it is. We'll just probably just leave it to try to get some of Mike's changes merged in. I had done a couple before. I do have it on a backup somewhere, but I'll probably just I'm going to try to do some more this week. I'm supposed to get a new computer tomorrow, so hopefully you should see my GitHub dots light back up tomorrow. That's what I'm hoping. So cool. All right. Anything else anybody want to talk about? I know Rand just put other, but so anything that we didn't touch on between you two, myself?
I only have a quick semi-announcement, but I noticed there's someone in the TypeScript community called Felix that's started doing typing all the Express repos for typings. So he's been contributing a bunch, and I'll try to get them moved into, I have an organization called @types, which I'll test and maintain it there. But as pieces of it become stable and I think it's good, I'll try to make pull requests back to Express to merge them back into Express, if that makes sense.
Oh, so that I just looked. So it's the Felix who has Finn the Human as his little avatar. I've seen his thing around before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to the types org that you just mentioned, and then the first one at the top, I was like, a typing for basic auth? Like, who would do that? This must be the guy you're talking about.
Well, I already typed basic auth connect as well. So we've typed both of those. We have 2 basic auth middlewares. One is in Express and one is in JSHTP. I never knew that.
Yeah, of course, the basic auth in JSHTP is not supposed to be a middleware. I'm trying to look here. Good, it's not a middleware. Great. I was just hoping. I think it used to be a middleware. Yeah, so it's basically just the parsing for that, for basic auth.
I hadn't looked at the types, so that makes sense. Okay.
But cool. So yeah, that's funny. I need to look at these typings thing. I started using Visual Studio Code a while back as my editor instead of Notepad++. So like I have like a kind of real editor now instead of just like Notepad. But it knows TypeScript and all that stuff, so theoretically I should be kind of getting a little bit better at that. This module was super simple. I'm looking at the little .d.ts file because it doesn't do too much. So, and you remember back. So I remember I touched on this earlier in the HTTP2 about the recres object, and a lot of that really plays into this type stuff too. So I know that's why we originally talked about it, was because of the typings and stuff.
And you'll probably see there that we have a ton of modules now depending directly on HTTP as well. The HTTP typings, though, not that.
Right,
So.
which is fine, of course. So I saw that you did, because it says like import from HTTP. Do you know what the repo is called for the typings for that HTTP? Oh, npm HTTP server, is that it? No, never mind, that's different.
No, there's one called env-node. I'll paste it here.
Oh, env. So it's prefixed with env.
Yeah. I was trying.
What's the difference between the npm dash and env dash?
I was trying to keep prefixes between them in case there's conflicts, basically, because you could end up technically with conflicts if someone had decided to type like global Mocha and Mocha programmatic definition.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
But some of the stuff might disappear since we're trying to merge with TypeScript core now, and they don't have a prefix idea. So.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, I'm looking at the incoming message interface that's in here. Pretty simplistic, straightforward. Headers are any, trailers any, raw trailers any. Simple way to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think any because he's any, right? I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know headers is always going to be an object, so I don't know enough about TypeScript types at this time. But if there's something that's just saying it could be only an object rather than also an array, then that's possible.
Yeah, so you can do index signatures, which is like I don't know if that's what you're looking at.
Oh yeah, because I see raw headers as string square braces, so I assume that means that it's a dictionary of string values. Oh yeah, it is an array. That's right. Raw headers, I forgot, is an array. It's not a dictionary. I never really use raw headers, so I don't. And it's some of my new feature.
That's good. I used it a lot when I was writing an HTTP client because I wanted the original headers. So pretty much everything I've built used that. I got used to that.
Yeah. That reminds me, too, real quick, before we go, I wanted to ask about Node versions with you guys real quick. So, right now, Express 4 supports Node.js 0.10 and up, while the majority of our middleware supports Node.js 0.8 and up, and the majority of some of those simple utilities, like in JSHTTP and stuff, support Node.js 0.6 and up. So obviously the simple ones, really the support is just for the tests at that point. Like theoretically, a lot of them are so simple, like it doesn't even matter what Node version, really. So the reason, and it's not to get an answer, just to kind of like get thinking or hear your thoughts on it, but so one, I've always heard. So one, obviously, from I feel like from our point of view, less Node versions the better, right? Easier to support. But at the same time, as I feel like as library authors, we're sort of almost like kind of like obligated just as library authors to kind of like at least help people out by supporting whatever people actually do use. I've also heard arguments, of course, because at the same time, we're basically conflicted, right? As library authors, we don't want to have a super burden of support by a ton of modules, So I'm only talking about, like, it's reasonable support. Obviously, if some module that, like, literally can't function without something in Node 4 and plus, clearly that is off the table to support lower because it's not possible. So I'm mainly talking about modules where it's actually possible to support older versions, and we just don't want to. So I know that I had opened up this issue a long time ago of, like, should Express 5 do 4 plus? One thing I always feel like kind of like almost as like a non-argument is that you guys may or may not have heard the same kind of argument too. Is that, oh well, since Node.js 0.10 is ending LTS support in October, therefore we as a module author should also stop supporting it, right? To me, it feels like a non-argument because it doesn't mean people stop using it magically. And I feel like as a module author, that really I like to support what people use rather than just whatever is easiest for me, because like I said, they're conflicting things. And of course, just saying like, oh well, Node.js 0.10 is not supported by core doesn't mean that people will stop using it, of course. In fact, I am still have to use 0.10 in a bunch of places. And I'm actually still running stuff on Node 0.8. Now, a lot of this stuff, of course, doesn't necessarily mean it's public internet facing and things like that. And of course, obviously, that's not really a good excuse or anything. But a lot of times, developers only, in engineering and stuff, only have so much influence, regardless. And sometimes the answer is, well, then just don't do whatever you're doing anymore instead of let's go upgrade it. So, so I just wanted to kind of put that up there on things. I know, especially with Blake, because I know really it'd be awesome if we can get just types definitions included in our modules. That's very different from writing our modules in TypeScript. Just these definitions, pros and cons, right? Con is as two. I always hear con is like, oh well, you have to maintain definitions separate from your code. Yeah, I guess kind of a burden, but at the same time, I feel like writing them in TypeScript sure might be nice. I feel like it's probably nice. Like I said, I still have not personally written in TypeScript, but at the same time, I feel like it's a high barrier to entry for just people. I know I hear from a lot of UI people about Angular, so I know a lot of UI people don't really, that I know at least, don't look in any code anyways, so it's not like they care. But the ones that actually do sort of care, like are kind of like in the middle ground, just have no idea what's going on because they just don't know TypeScript. So I mean, it is kind of like a barrier to entry, just being not JavaScript in a JavaScript community, regardless of how semi-similar it is. So, I mean, I don't know. At this point, I'm not inclined to write Express in TypeScript.
Yeah, I mean, there's also issues with that you usually don't think about, but when it comes to tooling, for example, ESLint doesn't work on TypeScript, so standard doesn't work on TypeScript, and I mean, there's all these little things just because it isn't JavaScript. And
yeah, of course, I think there's TSLint is like the TypeScript version of ESLint, but yeah. And obviously, like the types of issues that kind of thing catches, some of those are caught just by TypeScript's nature itself during its compilation phase or whatever. Technically, just transforming phase. It's not really compiling code. It's just translating it, or whatever. But and I know that was kind of a tangent from the Node.js version topic, but
yeah,
I feel like it was semi-related-ish.
Regarding the Node.js version, I know there is a document that was linked in one of the Express discussions issues. I don't actually know where it is from, but apparently it's kept up to date with some kind of Node and NPM versions over time. It seems like this month is the first month where the usage of Node 6 actually went above the usage of 12 and 10 individually. But I think there's still, according to this, there's still 70% are using 0.10 and 10% are using 0.12. Again, I don't know where these numbers are from, but I do believe that there is still people using 0.10 and 0.12 at least. So, and I don't really see a problem keeping support there. On the other hand, dropping 0.6 and 0.8, maybe I know I personally almost never test for them because the version of NPM that ships with 0.8, right, I think doesn't support the
Caret.
Yeah.
Yep. Stupid Caret.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate it in multiple ways. I mean, to be fair, it's useful, but it's annoying in that they added support for it. Like, in fact, it was the built-in version of npm in the early stages of 0.10 also didn't support it. It was one of the patch version of 0.10 that they included a version of npm that supported the caret. So it's like pseudo weird. Literally, I have to deal with these systems that literally have like the newest version of 0.10 on them, but the npm is a different npm that came bundled with a different area, and it doesn't support the carets, and it causes so many endless headaches. Because I mean, people choose these. People use the dependencies that work for them, and they'll have carets somewhere in their dependencies of dependencies of dependencies or some crap.
Yeah.
So we have to have all these things in place to work around this issue, so they can still use their dependencies. We're not going to tell them they need to not use that dependency just because of that caret. So.
Yeah.
But cool. Yeah. Yeah. As far as I can tell, besides just people just not wanting to support stuff, as far as I can tell, just kind of like from asking around and things, I mean, it seems that still there's a lot of people that actually still use 0.10. Now, 0.12 seems to be not very much. In the IOJS version, seemed to be very little. It wasn't until kind of like Node.js 4 that there was started to become a real uptick after 0.10 of like competing versions, and yeah. So, but cool. Just wanted to get you guys thinking on that and getting your thoughts in here, and just tell anybody who listens to it what my thoughts are. And my thoughts are that it's nice to minimize your support burden, but at the same time, I think that at the same time, it's as library authors that it's nice if we can actually support stuff that people do use, even if there's a bunch of people there. Obviously, there are a lot of people. I do every so often see people. I mean, this is just people who make noise. Doesn't mean it's the majority or anything. But every so often I do see people who seem to conflate the fact that, oh, well, your library isn't written in ES6, therefore I can't use ES6 with it. It's like it's not related in any way. I don't even know why you would say that, but whatever.
Yeah.
So, obviously Express's choice of whatever version of ECMAScript it's using really doesn't relate to what version of people can use, especially since Express doesn't expose stuff. So there might be something where like, oh, well, if Express exposed some kind of like arrays, right, and Express could make them an iterator, like add the iterator symbol to its prototype, okay, I could see something like that, right? But we don't, as far as we don't do anything like that, so it's not like, whatever. It's like, sure, there's a couple places we could use map or set or something, maybe, I guess.
Yeah.
But even then, we could theoretically, like, as far as I know, map and set and stuff, we can make shims for. It's only weak map you can't really, like, you could make a shim for a weak map, but it literally at that point isn't a weak map, and therefore you're just not using a weak map. So
actually, I think that the shims, I was thinking that as well, but looking at the implementations of the shims of weak map, they actually store your information on that object itself as a non-enumerable property. So when that object goes out of scope, it will actually work as a weak map.
Oh, really?
It will kind of pollute the object that you're using as the key.
Gotcha. Yeah, because that's the other thing, of course, is that usually if you're shimming stuff like maps and stuff, you probably don't have symbols either.
Yeah.
And symbols are the way that was kind of made to make it so you could silently pollute other people's objects.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as far as Node versions go, I usually personally, for my own private repository or personal packages on NPM, I support 010, 012, 4, and 6, as I think those are the ones that are most used.
Yeah, and like from our point of view, especially with Travis CI, yeah, supporting 0.6 is becoming near impossible to easily do with Travis CI. Not because of Travis, but just because, like, we may have this philosophy, but of course, if we're using a testing harness, like, say, like Mocha, and they don't share the same philosophy, then it kind of sucks because, we want to test on the version we support. Thankfully, I had a long time ago kind of like raised the flag that, it'd be really awesome if you guys could support O.8 a while ago. So they did support it for a long time. Supertest, though, annoyingly, they put a caret in one of their minor versions, so that was kind of annoying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so O.6 is becoming very difficult. O.8 is still kind of bearable. It's becoming a little bit harder as more and more carets propagate around. Yeah. So just from running on CI on Travis, anything lower than O.10, you end up having to make workarounds, because if you ever look in like their Travis.yaml files, you'll see I have like, don't install Istanbul if you're O.8 or O.6. Oh, and also ESLint, don't install that either. When you're running a test, don't even run with coverage if there's no Istanbul installed, because it may or may not be installed. And yeah, so it does become a little bit of a mess, and it's recently getting, like I said, a little harder and harder, because for anything using O.6, I have to pin. I can't use Mocha 2. I have to only use the last Mocha 1. And of course, I guarantee at some point, Mocha 1, there's going to be some Node.js version, maybe like version 7 or 8 or something, which is not going to work anymore. And then at that point, I don't want to have it sometimes installing Mocha 1 and sometimes installing Mocha 4 or something.
Yeah.
So,
Mocha dropped support for Node.js
right.
I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, they did. So the reason I bring that up just to think about is because, I always feel like dropping support for a major Node.js version in a module is like a pseudo breaking change, because it's not super break, it's not breaking in like the our API sense, like especially if we don't actually change any code when we do that. But it's kind of breaking in promise breaking, because someone could be using O.8 and just being like, yeah, of course I can depend on 1.x of that module, it won't break on me, and then next thing you know, they just can't install it anymore when they turn back around at some point, which is annoying. Obviously, how to manage that, I'm not getting into, how they would manage just not doing that, but regardless, it's possible, so that's why I see it as like a pseudo-breaking change, usually.
Yeah, I think it should be a major bump if you drop support for at least if you do something that you know will not. Yeah, but I think it should be a breaking change, actually, however you do it, because otherwise you will have you might have a dependency that depend on you and someone else depending on them, and then you just drop support, and it's
right. Yeah, and the other reason I bring that up too, just for us to start thinking about, is because there are some modules out there, like some of this middleware and stuff, are kind of like ripe for getting a major version bump, and they do support, like I said, pretty much all, at least those modules do support down to O.8. So of course, this is the perfect time to say, well, maybe we should just not just go all the way up to 4 even, but just say, like, let's cut off O.8, right, so we can use at least the current Mocha and things like that. So I just don't understand how many people really use O.8, especially because I think that NPM does collect stats, but I'm pretty sure that stat collection stuff wasn't even added until an NPM that was later than the one that came with O.8. So I don't even think they can really get an accurate count. They can just say if they're not reporting stats, then maybe they're an early O.10 or an O.8 or something. But
I think it would be a good idea to drop O.8. I don't think it's that widely used, and I don't know when the kind of like Node.js LTS or support ended for O.8, but I think it has ended. Especially as O.10 is ending now.
As far as I know, when they came up with the LTS plan, O.8 wasn't even on the table to even talk about. It was just implied dead. And of course, like I said, from our point of view, I think it's a fallacy as a module authors to say just because Node.js Core doesn't support security patches on it, mean that somehow it's irrelevant for us to support as a module library. Sure, users shouldn't be using it, but sometimes they do. Sometimes it's because it's like literally some hobby project. Maybe it's just like some stupid Adreno. I mean, and they just don't want to be bothered with upgrading it. I mean, we're not here to dictate security stuff and force it down their throats exactly. Even if we would want to, for example, Microsoft with Windows 10 mandatory updates. So that's the kind of like things. It's such a delicate balance. So
yeah, we could use that the post install script to the Express package that just automatically upgrades to the latest node.
Yep. Where's your node? I will go download a new executable for you for your platform and override it. There you go. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Oh, did you guys see that there was this article? I was really confused. I wrote it off as someone just being stupid, but apparently someone in the comment, they said it was satire. It popped up on Echo.js, and they're like, I installed Express, and there's like 200 some dependencies, and like there's one called Yummy, and it's like this weird thing. I was like, what are they even talking about? They must be a moron.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading it, and then I kind of understood when reading more, especially when they showed like a screenshot of the code of some dependency that
had Guy Ferrari or whatever. Yeah. At that point I was like it was really weird. I'm like, what? Are they like have a special editor that like inlines an image in there? Because that's not text. But yeah. But yeah, that was kind of funny. Makes you wonder. Like, I don't know about what you guys feel, but sometimes I do read Echo.js. Obviously, like anybody can. It's an open forum. It's kind of like a Reddit. I don't know if there's really even moderators on that thing, but everything I only read just to kind of like see what people say. I literally comment on nothing. Because I feel like it's just a waste of my time. But I do read stuff just to understand, kind of like what people feel like, without, I'm not here to get in any, even if, say like that wasn't satire, if legitimately the person thought that, like, sure I would have read it and stuff, but I wouldn't have commented on it anyways. But so, that's how I always feel about those kind of things anyways. It's like, I'm still literally today I was thinking if someone was going to open up an issue on Express.js about the Yummy dependency. I think that would be hilarious if someone did that.
Yeah.
Like, not out as a joke and literally knowing that was wrong. I meant like legitimately thought that was an issue. Otherwise that's just annoying if it wasn't like legitimate, like I thought this was an issue. So cool. All right. Well, I don't have anything else. So if anybody else has anything, I'll end the broadcast here, recording.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, we will meet again in 2 weeks. For everybody, that is August 24th. Cool. All right. Take care, guys.
Take care. See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.